What is up, you guys? Glitchiz here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm bringing you a fun and interesting alternate hunter build that has a bit of a story to it that I wanted to share with you guys. I thought it was kind of funny. I honestly was not going to make this build. I have stated in previous build videos, especially previous hunter build videos, as to why I don't make builds of this particular type. However, when I dropped my previous best hunter build for the Frozen Frontier update, which got a ton of positive feedback and support from you guys that were watching, which I greatly appreciated, there was one particular viewer that wasn't too happy about it, and I don't know why. I normally don't really care about comments, but this one in particular hit a little bit different and kind of bothered me. So I wanted to share the conversation that I had with this gentleman and explain to you why I'm making this video today. So here is our conversation from YouTube. His name is Casimir. He is, by the way, a diehard, brutal survival difficulty 1% try-hard hunter player, I'm assuming. This build is going to struggle hard in many parts of the new content as well as the Hollowed Halls. This is false. I tested it in the Hollowed Halls plenty of times, as I'm sure a lot of you have, and it works perfectly fine. It's all single target, also false. Multi-shot clears out waves of enemies perfectly fine as well. You need explosive arrows and shell shock to clear rooms with dozens of enemies on you at the same time. Explosive arrow is off the charts OP, and the level 11 version does almost the same damage as an obsidian arrow. So that's about the one true thing in that comment that actually makes sense. It is about the same damage per arrow as the obsidian arrow and has good AoE if you spec all the points into explosive arrows, which I will be doing in this build. But then we continued on. Another person said, just respec when you do the Hollowed Halls. I said, just use multi-shot with bow and arrows because they're weak to blunt damage. To which he replied, is your goal as a content creator to produce accurate, quality content, or are you just here to flood the internet with misleading clickbait? It's clear from your latest video that you've thrown together a single boss fight build without actually playing through the content using this build and other builds that you're promoting. If you had real experience, you'd know how absurd your claims are. Daggers are currently useless, and Explosive Arrow is vastly superior in a ranger's kit across the board. Works with multi-perma stuns, entire rooms, has chain reaction. You wasted a ton of skill points on dagger and poison skills while pushing it as the best hunter build. This isn't just a mediocre build, it's a bait and switch. You beat the final boss on relaxed difficulty, which was false. I had it on the normal difficulty. Everything was set to default, which was misleading your audience into thinking that it was normal. If you're serious about quality, try showcasing builds that dominate survival difficulty and effortlessly handle normal mode, which, if you guys didn't notice, I did that exact same thing with my warrior build. I went into the Hollowed Halls on its survival difficulty, just for this particular comment, out of spite. Stop misleading your viewers or farming views with mediocre content packaged as the best. To then in which I replied, someone's mad. 1, not everyone plays extreme mode. In fact, I'd say 1% maybe does. 2, I've been making top tier builds and have been well known for my build crafting and testing since Enshrouded's launch, which I'm sure a lot of you can attest to. Number 3, I don't base everything off of max damage. I base it off of max viability, and currently explosive arrows for most players are too expensive and too great of a time sink to invest into a 100% explosive arrow build. I have mentioned this in my previous hunter builds as well, and instead of crying about it, why don't you post a video that instead of crying about me posting a video that isn't for a hardcore player like yourself, why don't you post your own amazing build that's supposedly better and see how it does? I didn't mislead anyone. I spent a long time testing this build across every aspect of the game, not just the boss. Do I think daggers are mediocre? Yes. But as a content creator, I also have to cater to what the viewers want. And after a recent poll, almost every one of the viewers that recommended I make a hunter build wanted a hunter build that also was viable with daggers. So this build gives the best of both worlds, and does significant damage actually when combined with poison, which is why I spec'd into that, which you clearly haven't tested yourself either. And lastly, nobody's forcing you to watch my videos. If you don't like them, feel free to take your keyboard warrior ass somewhere else. Have a great day. To which he then replied, this just highlights how out of touch you are with the current state of the game. Claiming that explosive arrows are too expensive is laughable. Explosive Arrow 1, a level 11 ammo, which outperforms obsidian arrows, is crafted with flint arrows, the most basic type, tar and clay. This is true. Too expensive? Seriously? Sticks, flint, wood, clay, buddy? Meanwhile, you suggest using weaker arrows that require farming the halls for materials. He's referring to the bone arrows, which, as if you watched my previous hunter build videos where I recommended the bone arrows, you get more than enough bones just from one hollowed halls run to craft multiple hollow hall runs worth of bone arrow ammunition. So if you're going to use this build on brutal difficulty for a hollowed halls, within one run you'd have enough ammo to do it anyway. This is yet another example of how shallow and mediocre content based on a surface level understanding of the game mechanics are. Do better. To which I then responded in closing, in the words of Justin Timberlake, cry me a river. Keep going and I'll make a special build video named after you. And don't worry, I'll make sure everyone loves that one too. So here we are. We're making a special, unique Hunter Explosive Arrow Rambo tryhard build just for Kazanir. And I don't know if you guys saw the thumbnail, but is it just me or does Rambo and Kazanir have a very similar resemblance to each other? It's uncanny how close they are. So that was the conversation, and that is what led me into making this build, despite me not wanting to do it. I will say that it is still a very good build, and like I mentioned in those comments, I'm sure you all will love it. However, I will also go into the math and the timing behind everything that I spent almost an hour and a half calculating to prove to you why I don't recommend running this style of build and why I don't personally do it with my hunter builds. But that being said, let's jump into the details of it. So if you do want to use it, if you're one of those 1%ers that want to do survival difficulty on all max settings and be able to clear anything no problem, this is the build for you. So let's jump in to the armor. The armor is going to be, surprise, exactly the same as what I had in my last hunter build. Starting off with the boots, we have the Trailblazer boots with a minus 700 stamina regeneration delay for almost infinite stamina regen. As soon as you hit 0, this kicks in and you recharge almost instantly. It also has plus 4 stamina regen and 2 frost resistance. Next, we have the pants. The Alpine Antler trousers. This will give 22 stamina, very important on hunters, as well as plus 1 sprint speed and another 2 frost resistance. Moving on to the gloves, we have the Alpine Antler gloves. I'm not going to worry about the alt one on this because we won't be running daggers. This is strictly an explosive arrow try-hard hunter build. This has plus 8% range damage, plus 15% damage against flying foes, and 1 extra frost resistance. Moving on to the chest, my tried and true favorite chest piece, as always, the Mountains Shadow Chest. This is a warrior chest piece, giving us 30 more stamina and 300 health, as well as 4 more frost resistance. And then last but not least, we have the Alpine Antler Hood. This will give us 14% critical strike damage with our ranged weapons and 16% range critical strike chance with our ranged weapons, as well as another 2 frost resistance. One thing that I haven't done that is pretty much mandatory for this build, that you guys have to have on if you want this build to be viable, is actually going to be the Jester hat, because Kazanir and anyone who sinks this much time into a build is a fool, in my opinion. So this is mandatory. You have to wear this if you're running this build. So I just wanted to point that out. Moving on to the rings. We are running the same double Rings of the Ancients. The stat boosts that you get from all of these attributes are too good to pass up on. Just to give you guys an example, 2 points in Constitution is going to be 100 more health. 2 endurance is 40 more stamina. 2 dexterity is 10% more range damage. So obvious reasons, really, really good. If for whatever reason you're in the lower levels or you don't have these rings, good alternatives that you can put in are going to be the exceptional stamina rings or maybe even an exceptional health ring. Those can both benefit the hunter as well, so feel free to swap in those. Moving on to the shield. We don't need it. We're going to be only using our bow. And if you're using a 2-handed dagger build like I did in my previous one, that takes up your shield slot anyways. So this is pretty much a empty slot for us. Don't have to worry about it. Moving on to the bows. The 2 that I use are going to be the Ignited Bow and again the Avalanche Starter. Avalanche Starter has 2 damage perks, 7 piercing, 7 ice magic, which is good against all the enemies in the Albanese Summit's territory. They're weak to frost damage, as well as Brutal, which will increase critical hit damage by 20%, Enduring, which increases our stamina regen by 1, and Health Leech, giving us some more health back if we need it. And then for The ignited bow, this has 3 damage perks. In this case, it's +7 fire magic damage. So the best base damage of any bow in the game with that particular draw speed, as well as Head Seeker for more stamina when you get headshots, and Recharge for 1 additional health regeneration. So those are the 2 bows. In the rare instance that we are in close quarters and we have to switch off our bow, I'm using the Mace of Wrath. If you guys watched my previous video on the best warrior build, you would understand why the Mace of Wrath is the best one-handed weapon. This is also why I still equipped the shield, is because in the rare instance where we do swap to this, we have something that we can defend with as well if we so choose. This has 5 damage perks, 3 of which are ice magic damage, 1 piercing, and 1 blunt. This is, not in my opinion, it is the hardest hitting raw damage one-handed weapon in the game right now. So that's why I use that. Moving on to ammunition, I'm running the obsidian arrows and steel arrows for my normal ammunition, magic eternal frost arrows for lower level enemies in the beginning zones, stun arrows for enemies like the dragon boss, and then primarily for this build we are going to be running explosive arrow 1 and explosive arrow 2, both underwhelming in my opinion, but I'll explain why in a minute. But these 2 arrows are what this entire build is ideally going to be focusing around. Moving on to consumables and throwables. Because it's an explosive based build, I thought it would be interesting to throw in some new incendiary balls. This is a nice little AoE throwable item that you can throw on the ground and just splash fire over all the enemies for doing a ton of AoE damage and stunning enemies in place for extended periods of time. These can actually come in handy to do a little bit more AoE damage, so I figured why not just throw them in there. I also take the 2 best healing potions. We got the Revitalizing Health Potion for 800 health and the Superior Health Potion for 1000. I also take the Improved Bandages for healing over time. This is great for countering burn damage against the Dragon Boss. For other one-offs, I like Flask of the Fell for more stamina, 20 more stamina, always important on a hunter. I take the Wisp of Light to illuminate dark areas like caves. Greater Shroud Survival Flask to increase our time in the Shroud if we need it. And then for our damage potions and consumables, I take the Elixir, which will give plus 30% damage multiplier for 30 minutes. And then last but not least, in the rare case that we're going to be using our one-handed melee weapon, you can craft a Vakar Altar and grab this buff. And if we view this one, what that one does is it gives us 25 more health and 20 melee damage. So that's another buff you can take. One thing I haven't mentioned in any of my build videos that I actually kept forgetting is actually your pet buff as well. If you have a cat or dog, you can talk to them and they will give you a nice little kiss buff, which will give you another 25 health. It's called the Paws Touch. So that's a nice little mini health boost there that you can grab for free. So be sure to grab that. But moving on. For the food items that I would recommend, we will be taking the perk that allows us to have 4 food items. Obviously, we're going to want the best in slot stir-fried vegetables for 5 dexterity. We also want for our meat slot the chicken soup. This will give 4 constitution for a bunch more health, plus another dexterity for more range damage. Then we want the milkshake. This is a new one. This will give 5 endurance, 5 stamina recharge, and another 4 dexterity. So again, a bunch more range damage there. And then lastly, the overall regen item that I recommend is the pumpkin soup. This gives plus 6 health regen, plus 4 stamina recharge, and 2 more frost resist. If you're going to be using this build in the hollowed halls, one alternate that you can do, I'd probably swap out the pumpkin soup for it, is going to be the excellent ectoplasm soup. You will lose 150 health, but you will get in exchange 15% more damage against all hollow enemies, so pretty much everything within the hollowed halls, as well as 10% additional life leech chance against hollowed enemies, so you can regen health very quickly while you're in the hollowed halls with this as well. So that's always good, and I'll probably have one equipped when I do my survival difficulty demonstration at the end of the video. So that is all the throwables and consumables and potions. Moving on to the skills. Here is the update. Taking some extra points into sneak attack and backstab damage if we are ranged and can get a one-up shot on an enemy from behind. This will give 25% bonus damage for sneak attacks. In the Assassin's tree, we're taking the point in dexterity, followed by airborne and updraft for a more efficient glider. Next, we want the point in endurance, followed by sniper. When attacking with a ranged weapon, your critical hit chance is increased by 10%. Then we have blessed arrows. When scoring a critical hit with a bow, you will regenerate 20 mana. And then another point in dexterity. On the other side, we have vital surge. Dealing a critical strike with a ranged weapon restores 5 stamina. Point in dexterity for more range damage, and then shell shock. This one's important for this build. Infuse your ranged explosive arrows, in this case with mana. They now stun enemies for up to 1 second. Mana cost is 5 per stunned enemy. This will combo well with the blessed arrows, because if we do multi-shot and any of them crit, the amount of mana that we get back will more than cover all the stuns that we're doing, so that kind of balances out there. Next, we're going to take Bounty Bonanza. After defeating a fell enemy with a headshot, your group gains an additional 5 experience points. If you're max level, this really doesn't matter, but we're taking it in order to get further up the tree. Next, we have Ricochet. For every target you hit with an explosive arrow, its damage is increased by 1%. So that's going to further extend the viability of our explosive arrows. Graceful Stride, you will gain 1 dexterity for every 2 levels of flame. So that's 3 more points in dexterity if you're at max flame. It should be 4, but all of these alter perks are bugged right now. I did send the bug report into the devs, and hopefully they fix that soon. If you're maxed at 8, and we're supposed to be getting a point for every 2 levels, then you should be getting 4 points, but for whatever reason, all of these alter ones, you're only getting 3 right now. And then last but not least, we have Chain Reaction. Every enemy hit with an explosive arrow has a 20% chance to trigger a secondary explosion for 50% damage in a small radius. So very, very good in areas like the Hollowed Halls, where enemies are going to be tightly grouped up. You'll just see chain reactions of explosions going off all over the place, and it helps take the enemies down and stun them much quicker. So this is a big perk to take for this particular style of build as well. Moving on to the Ranger tree, we want the point in dexterity for more range damage, followed by Marksman. All damage dealt with ranged weapons is increased by another 10%. Counter Battery for 15% damage to ranged enemies. Sharpshooter, which increases all range damage by another 20%. Next, pick up Eagle's Bane. Damage against flying enemies will increase by 30%, and Bee Sting. This is what allows you to hover midair when you aim while jumping. Really good for getting those explosion shots off above enemies' heads. You can just double jump above a pack of them and then just shoot your arrows straight down. It's really handy. Next, we have Ranger. This gives 2 points in endurance, 2 points in dexterity, 5 into stamina recharge, 5% into critical damage, and 5% into critical chance. Next, pick up Skill Shot. All damage dealt to an enemy's head is increased by 20%, followed by Multi-Shot. When using regular arrows, there's a 20% chance to spawn a flurry of arrows that spread slightly. This will cost an additional arrow, but will not trigger on special arrows. That being said, we will move on to Multi-Shot Spread and Multi-Shot Trigger, which will allow us to do multi-shot with those special arrows as well, and add another 25% chance to spawn an additional 4th arrow to our flurry of arrows during multi-shot when we do a multi-shot. So that's pretty cool there, and we just want to pump out as much explosive arrows and any arrow in general as possible, so that is why we're focusing on that. Moving on to the Beastmaster tree, we're getting the point in endurance, followed by Snake Eater and Mithridatus for more poison resistance, followed by the point in endurance and Slice and Dice. This one's not a big deal because we're not using daggers, but I took it in order to get the next point in dexterity because we want as much dexterity in our build as possible. Then we move on over to the Survivor tree, pick up the point in endurance, followed by Runner and endurance and Wanderlust for more efficiency when running and have stamina efficiency. Double jump for obvious reasons, better traversing of the terrain. Swift shot sustenance for a 30% chance to spawn a stamina orb when defeating an enemy with a bow, which we're always going to be doing. And backstab mastery for another increase of backstab damage by 30%. Then we pick up good metabolism, which will make our stamina orbs that we're going to be creating 30% better effective, and give our health and mana potions 20% more efficiency as well. Rebound to increase base stamina regen by 50%, followed by Sweet Tooth. If you're using sweet items, then this will make them a little bit better. Personally, I don't use sweets for the top slots that we're going to be using, but we're taking it in order to get to dessert stomach. That's the key one. So another point in dexterity for the more range damage, and then dessert stomach to gain that additional food slot. So that is all of our range perks and explosive perks in particular covered. The last thing that we want to do is focus on more durability. So let's head over to the tank tree and pick up the usual points that we take there. Point in constitution, followed by shiny plates. We are using some physical armor, so that will make those few pieces a little bit better, as well as heavy plates to increase our armor resistance by another 10%. For those of you that don't know, the max resistance that you can get against enemy attacks is 60. So just to give you an example, if an enemy does 100 damage to you and you have 100 armor, you will still take 40 damage because the max armor that you can resist is 60% of that. What this does is it increases that resistance cap to 70, so the enemy would then only do 30 damage instead of 40. Just makes your armor a little bit more efficient. Then we have another point in Constitution for more health, followed by Tower and Warden. This will give us more physical and magical resistance. When there are 3 or more enemies within 20 meters, you suffer 10% less physical damage. And then for Warden, when there are 3 or more enemies within 20 meters, you suffer 15% less magical damage. Next, pick up the point in Constitution for more health, followed by Earth Aura. Again, I take this in almost every build that I make. Shields you and all of your allies, reducing income and damage by another 10% flat out. And then last but not least, Thick Skin. This will give us 3 more points in Constitution because of our Flame Altar, giving us a nice big health boost as well from that. So that is the new and improved explosive arrow focused try-hard build. I will put a web UI link, just like all my other build videos, down in the description, so feel free to go check that out. But before we close, I want to show all of the data that I got and why I think that this build isn't very viable and why most people shouldn't and wouldn't use it unless you are a try-hard 1% survival difficulty player like our friend Casimir here. And this is what I found. So let's go over here. We'll start off with explosive arrow ones, since Casimir insisted that these things were so easy to craft. And I think it's safe to say that regardless of what arrow type you're using, if you're going to go out on a even somewhat extended farming session for whether it's a hollowed halls or just exploring, having 1,000 of each type of arrow that you're going to be taking isn't too much to ask for. So I based all of my math off of just one 1,000 stack for these 2 types of arrows, and this is what I found. So explosive arrow 1, we want 1,000 of them. You get 25 per stack, which means we will have to do 40 crafts of these arrows. Each craft requires flint arrows, and total, we're going to need 1,000 of them. So you divide that by the 50 flint arrows per stack that we get when we craft a stack of them. That means to get 1,000 explosive level 1 arrows, we will need to craft flint arrows 20 times. So that leads to a total of 200 twigs and 200 flint stone that you're going to have to go out and farm. Not too bad. But you will also need tar. The amount of tar you're going to need is 400 total. We get 20 per craft a stack when you craft tar at your little clay hut over there, which means we will have to craft 20 tar stacks total to get 1,000 arrows. By the way, that is approximately 1 hour of in-game crafting time. So still not too bad, but it is a little bit of a nuisance right out the gate. If you want to craft these and don't have it available, you do have to wait 1 full hour just to get the tar that you need to make these explosive level 1s. That in general will be 600 total wood logs that you will need, 120 dirt, and 200 lumps of clay. So total mats required are 200 twigs, 200 flintstone, 600 logs, 120 dirt, 200 lumps of clay, and 1 hour of crafting time, not including the time that it's going to take to go out and farm all of those secondary materials like the clay and the twigs and stuff like that. So if that doesn't seem bad to you, then by all means, you could attempt the max level 30 survival difficulty with just explosive arrow level 1, which I wouldn't recommend. If you're on that high of difficulty like Casimir wants us to, you're going to want to have the highest quality explosive arrows possible, especially if that's all this build is geared around. So let's look at 1,000 explosive arrows level 2, and this is where things get a little bit interesting. So per stack of explosive arrows level 2, 2, we get 25, which means, again, we will need to craft this stack 40 times to get 1,000 of the explosive arrow level 2s. Same as explosive arrow level 1, we will need to make 1,000 flint arrows, so 20 crafts total of that. So another 200 twigs and 200 flintstone there. Then you need feathers, which require, I believe, 5 per stack. So that is 200 feathers that you would need. Even that, not a big deal. They did increase the amount of feathers that drop. So you can get these somewhat quickly if you farm the birds and things like that. So not a big deal. But then we get into the final thing that is required, and that is black powder. And this is where I think people don't realize where the time sink and why I don't recommend going this route for your hunter builds is recommended. And that is because black powder alone, to make 1,000 arrows, we will have to craft 200 times, and black powder is crafted 1 barrel at a time, and just the black powder on its own will be 3 hours total of in-game wait time just to do the black powder. But if we go over to our little crafting table here, and by the way, these times that I'm going to be approximating and giving you guys that I calculated, that's with your workshop efficiency and everything set to the max 200%. It's going to be even longer, potentially double this amount of time if you have it set to normal time durations for all of these crafting materials. So we go over to our crafting bench here and look at black powder. And sure enough, this takes 3 more ingredients: nitrate, sulfur, and coal powder. Unfortunately, nitrate and coal powder also have more ingredients that they need to. And here's the math for that. So for just 1 black powder, we'll base it off of the 200 that we need because we're going for 1,000 arrows. You're going to need 200 sulfur. That's the easiest one to calculate because you just mine that and we only need 1 per stack. But then you also need coal powder to get the 1,000 arrows, or in this case, 200 black powder barrels that we need to make. That means you will need 400 coal powders in order to make those 200 black powders. And those coal powders have 5 per stack. So you divide the 5 divided by the 400 total we need. That means we will need to do 80 crafts of coal powder, which is another hour of crafting. Then you look at coal powder, and that takes its own crafting material, which is charcoal. Charcoal total for how many it requires per stack is 400, and we get 15 charcoal per craft, which means we have to do 27 crafts of charcoal, which is another hour and 10 minutes of wait time. The total cost for charcoal is 459 wood logs that we're going to need and 81 dirt. So then we have another 2 hours of waiting for the coal powder. Then we move on to the nitrate, and this is the best part about it. The nitrate, if you look at coal or black powder, requires 7 nitrate for every 1 black powder. You go over to nitrate, and nitrate requires 4 more ingredients. You need sand, salt, wood acid, and alchemical base. If you have not found these out in the wild, the wood acid and alchemical base also have to be crafted separately and have their own crafting durations. So nitrate, because it requires 7 per barrel of black powder, we will need 1,400 nitrates total to make 1,000 explosive to level 2 arrows. That is 5 nitrates per craft, which means we'll have to craft our stacks 280 times. Now, nitrates alone, crafting 280 times, is 7 hours of in-game gameplay time waiting for these materials to craft, just for the nitrate. You will need 1,400 in sand, 1,400 salt, 280 wood acid, which also has to be crafted separately. So let's go over there and go to our other bench. Wood acid then requires more wood logs and dirt, and for 10 in each stack, you have to wait another 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So if we total all that up, that is 420 wood logs, 84 dirt, 28 crafts total, leading to another 1 hour and 40 minutes approximately of wait time. I am being lenient and actually canceling out this time, because if you have multiple crafting benches like I am now, in theory, you could craft your wood acid at the same time that you craft your alchemical bases, which is the next thing that we have to craft. So I'm not even going to include this hour and 40 minutes, because the next thing we have to make is even longer, and you can craft this at the same time. So they're going to cancel each other out if you start them at approximately the same time. So then the last ingredient, once we get all that wood acid, is going to be the alchemical base. So let's go back to our next bench. So we're onto our fourth crafting bench now and look at alchemical bases. This takes 4 more materials that you have to go out and farm. If we go into the details, an alchemical base, in order to get the full 200 black powders that we need, will require 280 total alchemical bases. Just for the alchemical bases, that is another 2 hours and 15 minutes approximately of crafting wait time. And 280 shroud liquid, 280 mycelium, 280 water, and 280 shroud spores to make that ingredient. So if we calculate all of the required materials and all of the required crafting time, this is what it actually takes with maxed out 200% efficiency by changing your server settings to craft just 1,000 explosive arrows, which, by the way, if you're using multi-shot and things like that, you will burn through insanely quick. Like within 3 or 4 runs, you're gonna have to do all of this all over again. This is gonna become a daily or bi-daily routine of having to do this over and over and over again. So total required mats, you're gonna need 200 twigs, 200 flintstone, 200 sulfur, 879 wood logs, 165 dirt, 1,400 sand, 1,400 salt, 280 shroud liquid, 280 mycelium, 280 shroud spores, and approximately 14 hours and 10 minutes of in-game crafting time, which you cannot run, by the way, when you are offline. So you physically have to be logged in and just idle and letting this stuff craft in the background in order to work. And that does not include the time that it takes to actually go out and farm all of these individual materials as well. So that's just crafting time on the crafting benches. You're still going to need to fly around the map, find your shroud liquid, find your mycelium, mine your sand, mine your salt, mine your sulfur, things like that. So that's even more time that you're going to have to do with like 10 plus materials that you're going to have to farm. So as you can see, I don't know about you guys, if you call me crazy, but if you want to spend 14 plus hours every other day farming the materials required to make a viable explosive arrow build, which is insanely good. And I've said that if you want to be the best hunter, make an explosive arrow build, because it is by far the best with all the chain perks and damage perks you can. But when you see the math and you look into how long it actually takes to farm up these materials and the work that is required to actually make it viable, you got to be a fool to run it, honestly. Until the devs reduce the cost of black powder and things like that, it is just not worth it in my opinion. And like I mentioned previously, if all you're going to run is the level 1 explosive arrows, it's not going to be like consistent and viable enough in my opinion at the top tier survival difficulty with the highest level enemies in the game, in the highest level hollowed halls, for example. The damage just isn't enough for the amount that you're spending, in my opinion. So feel free to use it. It's a great build if you do have the materials. If you like run your own private server and can just give yourself all the mats, then this is going to be a phenomenal, very, very strong build where you just spam explosive arrows over and over and over again. But realistically, I wouldn't recommend it. So I guess I can leave you guys with the stats with all of our stuff buffed. So let's go ahead and do that now. And go to our character. And here we are. We are at 19 Constitution, 9 Spirit, 21 Endurance, 9 Strength, and 30 Dexterity, 10 Intelligence, as well as a 0-second stamina regeneration delay because of our boots. Moving on to, damage. We have 169 critical damage and 36% ranged critical strike chance. We also get bonuses to backstab damage and skill shot damage if we hit enemies in the head, 15 bonus damage to all ranged enemies, 45 bonus damage to all flying enemies, and 30% flat bonus weapon damage for using a bow. Moving on to the main attributes, we're sitting at 1,400 health, pretty nice. 280 mana and 582 stamina. You will never have to worry about stamina with this build, as well as a nice 158% range damage modifier for our main attributes. So all in all, probably the best, highest damage output hunter build in the game that you can make. But like I said, it's personally just not realistic in my opinion. Shout out to Casimir. If he's got the time to farm all these mats and make multiple explosive arrows, then by all means go for it. More power to him. But honestly, I will not be rocking this build without the Jester hat, because I'd be a fool to sit here and spend 15 hours every 2 days to make the ammo required to make this build work. And that's where I'll leave it. I will let you guys check out the basically damage test on brutal difficulty, survival difficulty, in the highest level Hollowed Halls area, just to kind of show off what this build is capable of. But if you enjoyed it, if you found it informative, be sure to smash that like button, comment down below. I appreciate all of your guys' feedback. Also, if you want to keep up to date on my future content, consider subscribing and turn on that notification bell. And then last but not least, as always, if you want to join a killer community of like-minded gamers, feel free to check the links down in the description and join us on the Discord. We've got over 1,000 members in there now, many of which are playing Enshrouded. So hopefully you jump in and we see you guys around here soon. But until the next one, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all later.